Ever wonder who the founder of Hinduism was? Or when Jesus was really born? In each episode of this weekly series, Patheos will answer a common question from across the spectrum of major religions. It's our hope that we both broaden your knowledge and spur you on to keep digging, to keep asking questions, and to foster a greater sense of curiosity about the world's beliefs. Welcome to Answers by Patheos.
What do Buddhists believe? Buddhism is one of 5 world religions found on every list of major religions. The other 4 are Hinduism, Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. These 5 are included in every list of major world religions due to their number of adherents, international spread, and influence on historical events. The list of major world religions is occasionally expanded to include Confucianism, Taoism, Sikhism, Baha'i, or larger categories of indigenous religions or new religious movements. In addition to being one of the 5 major world religions, Buddhism is also one of the 3 main universalizing religions. The universalizing religions are faiths that include as part of their creed or basic belief system a desire to spread throughout the world and convert other people. While many religions hope to gain new converts, universalizing religions see it as a sacred duty to convert others and may deliberately travel to other countries or areas to spread their faith. The 3 main universalizing religions are Buddhism, Islam, and Christianity. While most people understand Buddhism as a religion, some prefer to describe Buddhism as a philosophy or way of life. Some Buddhists may have a negative view of the word religion. To them, religion implies zealotry or closed-mindedness, so they would prefer to distance their own beliefs and practices from such a connotation. Others have a positive idea of religion but struggle to picture a religious tradition that does not worship a central deity or pantheon of deities. In Buddhism, nothing is eternal, so there can be no eternal deity. There's no place in Buddhism for any sort of true creator that Western religions would recognize. There are gods to be found in Buddhism, but the gods of Buddhism are mortal, if long-lived, as well as imperfect. A lack of true gods does not mean that Buddhism is not a religion. Religions are systems of life that answer key questions about the meaning of existence, give essential guidance to behavior, and create hopes and beliefs about life and death. The entire point of Buddhism is to transform from an ordinary ignorant person into an enlightened Buddha or a Bodhisattva, capable of using great compassion and understanding to free other beings from suffering. Like the other major religions, Buddhism has a clear code or creed it follows, and all of the Buddhist traditions agree on the basic underlying assumptions of the tradition, such as the source of suffering, the goal of liberation, the cycle of birth, death, rebirth, and karma. There's a strong Buddhist community spread across the globe that has organized itself into different schools and monastic traditions. Buddhism sets forth a clear set of values in the 5 precepts, gives greater meaning to life in the goals of the Bodhisattva path, and views the world through both the ordinary powers found in a human's 5 senses and through the extraordinary powers that Buddhists believe can be achieved through study, koans, and diligent meditation. Buddhists are as diligent about the practice of their faith as any Christian or Muslim. They also are willing to travel to spread their beliefs as missionaries. Furthermore, Buddhists in China and Tibet have famously suffered and died rather than betray their beliefs, just as Christian martyrs have done. Both in practice and in theory, Buddhism fits the criteria of a religion. Now that we've established Buddhism is a religion, let's examine the main beliefs of Buddhism. The 3 most basic beliefs of a Buddhist concern its founder, its way of life, and its community. Buddhists call these the 3 jewels, or the Triratna. To be a Buddhist is to take refuge in the Buddha, the founder, to embrace the Dharma, the way of life, and to associate with the Sangha, the community. Beyond these 3 jewels, the relative importance of other teachings may vary from school to school. Nevertheless, there's a vast common ground in concepts and approaches to the Buddhist life. Most Buddhists would emphasize the 4 Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path above all else. The 3 universal truths of Buddhism are impermanence, suffering, and no self. Impermanence is the Buddhist idea that nothing is eternal. Everything in life is always changing. If something's changed from one thing to another, by definition, the thing that was previously has disappeared. It's impermanent. The universal truth of suffering is based on the idea of this impermanence. If nothing is permanent, no desire is ever truly satisfied. A person can eat as much food as they wish, but that will not keep them from being hungry later. Besides, even if a person is perfectly happy at a specific moment, the world is far from perfect. No one is perfectly happy forever. Everyone is destined to suffer from unmet desires at some point. The third universal truth is that of no self. The Buddhist concept of no self deals with the idea that there is no permanent or unchanging aspect of a person that can be identified as the self. Instead, a person's consciousness and body are always shifting and changing. There's nothing about a person that is permanent. The Four Noble Truths are noble not in the sense of honorable or virtuous, but in the sense of deeply true or known and understood by the wise. Each truth addresses the reality of suffering in human life. The first noble truth is dukkha, usually translated as suffering. According to Buddhism, there are many kinds of suffering. Some are obvious and some are subtle. There is, however, no escaping suffering while one is living. As such, the first noble truth is sometimes described as life is suffering. Pain is inescapable as humans make their way through childhood, adulthood, old age, and death. The second noble truth addresses the origin of suffering, or samudaya. Samudaya, the root of all suffering, is tona, which refers to misplaced, unhealthy, or excessive desire. When desire runs amok, it usually takes one of three forms: greed, ignorance or delusion, and hatred or destructive urges. These are all called the three roots of evil, three fires, or three poisons. Unmet desires create pain. The third noble truth explores the cessation of suffering, or nirodha. Buddhism teaches that a person can become free of suffering by eliminating dangerous desires. This is done by liberating oneself from all forms of attachment. Those who do so successfully may achieve nirvana, so that when they die, they will not be reborn into a new life where suffering will continue. The fourth noble truth deals with the path to the cessation of suffering, and is essentially the teaching of the practices and ideas that a Buddhist follows. Understandably, that path to cessation of suffering varies between Buddhist schools. The largest and best known is the tradition known as the Middle Way, which follows the Noble Eightfold Path. The Noble Eightfold Path is a list of 8 steps that are said to lead to enlightenment. The 8 steps on the path are right understanding, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. The 8 steps can be grouped into 3 categories: wisdom, ethical conduct, and meditation. Though they are often read in a specific order, the 8 steps on the Eightfold Path are not meant to be undertaken in any specific order. Instead, each step should reinforce and encourage one another. So we've examined the beliefs of Buddhism. Now let's answer the question: who do Buddhists worship, if anyone at all? Buddhism is a non-theistic religion, and therefore worship is not a useful concept in the tradition. This means Buddhists do not believe in a specific god, goddess, or set of gods and goddesses who rule the cosmos. In Buddhism, nothing is eternal, so there can be no eternal deity. Similarly, one of the most basic ideas of Buddhism is that everything must come from something. This means that there's no place in Buddhism for any sort of true creator that Western religions would recognize. There are gods to be found in Buddhism, but the gods of Buddhism are mortal if long-lived, as well as imperfect. The more appropriate term instead of worship is to venerate. Buddhists revere many figures throughout history that have taught them how to live life and achieve enlightenment. The most famous of these figures is Gautama Buddha. Gautama Buddha, sometimes referred to as Shakyamuni Buddha, is the figure that most people in the West picture when someone describes the Buddha. Let's dive into the history of these venerated figures. Gautama Buddha was born Siddhartha Gautama in the 5th century BC. He was born a prince but eventually became disillusioned with the world and became an ascetic monk. This, however, did not give him the peace or clarity he was searching for. Siddhartha Gautama began to search for a new way to reach enlightenment. As he was sitting under a Bodhi tree meditating, Siddhartha Gautama achieved enlightenment and became a Buddha, an awakened one. Gautama Buddha is considered to be the author of the sutras that almost all Buddhists look to for guidance. While Gautama Buddha is not worshipped as a god, he's a figure worthy of great reverence and devotion in Buddhism, and seen as one of the greatest, if not the absolute greatest, moral teachers in history. Amitabha Buddha is the focus of the Buddhist tradition known as Pure Land Buddhism. A form of Mahayana Buddhism most commonly found in East Asia, Pure Land Buddhism holds that those who achieve enlightenment will be reborn into the Pure Land with Amitabha. Those who achieve rebirth in the Pure Land are not necessarily liberated from the cycle of rebirth, but it's much easier to work towards enlightenment and liberation while in the Pure Land. And finally, many Buddhists anticipate the Maitreya Buddha, the Buddha who is to come. This Buddha has achieved enlightenment and been reincarnated already many times, serving others as a bodhisattva. When he comes, he will be a universal teacher, bringing many to enlightenment. In conclusion, Buddhists don't worship in the traditional sense of the word, as there's no belief in a specific god or set of gods ruling the universe. Instead, they venerate figures like Gautama Buddha and other enlightened beings who have guided them on the path to enlightenment. The practice of veneration in Buddhism is more about respect and reverence for the teaching and wisdom these figures have imparted, rather than worshiping them as divine entities. Understanding this distinction helps to appreciate the unique approach to spirituality and enlightenment found in Buddhism.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Answers by Patheos. To learn more about the world's religions, please visit patheos.com today. This has been a production of the Patheos Podcast Network.